Over the next few minutes, how does John Lee Dumas, the presenter of the massively successful Entrepreneur on Fire podcast, do it? Things I've learned trying to turn this podcast into a public talk, research on whether anyone actually cares about Clubhouse, why you may be about to lose all your subscribers on iTunes, and many more things I've spotted in the world of podcasting this week that might help you. I'm Richard Midson. This is Can I Make a Hit Podcast, a show where I study the best content creators in the world and see how we can copy their techniques, whether it's to promote your business, your campaign, your brand, or frankly, if you're just having fun as well. So let's get started. This week I spotted John Lee Dumas, the man behind Entrepreneur on Fire, has been talking to Forbes. In the interview, he talks about the importance of giving value in his show, a bit of his backstory as well, and the fact he works apparently 5 days intensively per month and then supposedly kicks back a bit for the rest of it. He generates a daily show of around 20 to 40 minutes in duration. And while the style of his online internet entrepreneur show is targeted an audience of want-to-be entrepreneurs, there's still a lot to take in from the article, and I decided to study a few of his episodes too to see what he does, to see what we can learn from it. So for example, in his podcast, he gets straight to the point and quickly. There is no 15-minute long introduction or long rolling platitudes here about how nice it is to have someone with him. There's almost an assumption you wouldn't be here if you weren't good. So his introductions are around 30 seconds to a minute long, I found. Then he has his sponsor message, which can be a little bit longer. Then he gets very quickly into getting his guests to deliver value. In one interview I listened to, he had no preamble and was getting practical advice from his guests in under 10 seconds. I timed it because I thought it was amazing how he got there so fast and how it hooked me in. Now you can hear how he also uses this word value bomb in the interview to describe his approach. He wants real value from his guests fast, right at the start of the interview to hook his audience in. And that explosion of value can't be something that you can just Google in a few seconds as well. His podcast titles are also quite short, offer the solution to one problem per episode, such as creating a content plan. And they focus on a core set of topics, I noticed too. You can see how he uses the word riches and content creation a fair bit in his titles, as they clearly resonate with his target audience. I also notice how he speaks to his followers as Fire Nation. It's quite a distinct word, but again, clearly works for his demographic as he tries to make them feel part of his tribe within his nation. You can see how he's trying to pull people together there. The thinking behind it is pretty clear, as I say, and it's well targeted at people who dream of online business success and being part of that entrepreneurial community. I would love to know what you think of John's style too, and why you think he's successful and what you think he does well in targeting his particular audience. So do let me know in the comments or on my Twitter feed at HitPodcast2020. There is a lot more interesting stuff in the article, which I will link to in the episode notes on that Forbes interview there. Now, a very quick heads up, if you are telling people to subscribe to podcasts, it seems Apple will be phasing out the phrase because new podcast listeners get confused and think that subscribing means paying. So if you're offering a free podcast, you certainly don't want to be putting people off. You may want to change the word instead to follower, instead like Apple are going to, as soon you may not have any subscribers at all, only followers. Luckily, it is just a word change though. Now, do you want to target a very specific audience with your content? Because if you do, then I spotted some very interesting projects going on this week, which might give you some ideas about this. Now, in Britain and Europe, lots of businesses are struggling to get their heads around the new Brexit trade rules. So the London Business Hub, a government-supported body in the UK, is producing a podcast series to cover the issues and the questions, quite specific questions, that businesses are asking about this. It is hyper-targeted as a podcast series aimed at a very specific audience with very specific questions. Now, another example of this I spotted recently was with Celebrity Cruises, who operate cruise ships. They started a podcast, according to Travel Weekly, aimed at educating travel agents about the cruising business. Again, hyper-specific. So if our aim is to reach the right people with the right message, answering a specific question in an episode or series that the specific audience desperately wants to know the answers to could be exactly what you need to do. Now, it is niching, it is getting down to a very small group, but if it is businesses who are being affected by Brexit trade rules, that's still quite a big market if you're trying to reach your particular message or your particular products directly to them. Now, if you've been following my efforts to promote my podcast through public speaking, then I have a tip to share. You need a through line, as it will save you a lot of time and effort. Over the past month, I have been preparing for 2 speeches and spending a huge amount of time on it, which is why I haven't been doing these shows as well. And as you'll know, if you're a regular follower of this show, this was all part of an experiment to see if it's possible to promote content through public speaking. And what I found is that when you start trying to gather all your thousands of thoughts together, you end up with a mess of ideas. Like this. I thought this video summed it up. 30 minutes is a very short amount of time when you want to condense a year's worth of podcasting content into a speech. What I found made all the difference was this through line. It is a technique I picked up from TED Talks. And what I mean, in simple terms, is having a clear idea of what you're trying to get across. So, for example, let me give you the examples. In my talk to the WordPress community about podcasting, the through line was this. How do you convince a podcaster that they need a WordPress website? This isn't something I was telling to the audience. This was what I was using to gather my thoughts together. So that made me create a talk with 5 reasons why. Once I knew the through line, the structure and examples I needed to use became obvious. Now, for my other talk to the Innovation in Speaking conference, the through line there was how can you replace physical networking with online networking using the techniques podcasters use to build their networks. Networking, physical networking, is really important to public speakers who come off stage, start shaking hands. So my talk ended up being about how to map each part of physical networking, like shaking hands or getting a business card, over to online networking. I mapped each section of it across in my talk. Now, I still spend a lot of time on these talks, and I will share more on what I learned over the coming weeks and whether I think public speaking can help you promote a podcast too. But it was a fascinating experience. You know, one thing just off the top of my head here is I would say that I think it's probably better for promoting you as a speaker than using speaking to promote you as a podcaster. But anyway, I will talk a lot more about this over the coming weeks because I think there's a lot of stuff that we can learn as content creators and what we can see from what good content creators do that can help us with this. Now, talking and speaking, if you're a WordPress website user for your work, you might be interested in my WP Pivo talk anyway. I've included a link in the show notes. It outlines quite a lot of reasons why you want a website for a podcast, but it applies, frankly, to all the different website platforms out there. There's a bit at the start where I talk about particularly using WordPress, but after that, the second half of it is all about how to use a website effectively. So hopefully that's useful to you. I also recently gave that talk for public speakers, and after chatting with them, it looks like I am going to be doing another one as well for the public speaking community on podcasting. The event was called the Innovation in Speaking Conference, and it was a great event. I made a lot of new friends in the public speaking world over the past week. So I think I'm going to try a few more of these talks, which will help me to give you better ideas about what to do right and what to do wrong as a podcaster using public speaking. Now, in a moment, the latest on Clubhouse, but first, a quick tip. What are you going to do with that podcast reached out to me this week on the topic of boosting a post on Facebook to promote your latest podcast episode? Now, if you do this, don't forget Facebook has to approve the boost before it will run. So if you click to boost your episode post at 8 p.m, it may not go out till much later. I'm hoping to get the presenter of what you're going to do with that on this show soon to talk more about these tests too and some of the amazing work that they've been doing on social media as well. Right, an update on Clubhouse. Apart from the fact that I used the wrong logos in the last show, as there is another app called Clubhouse out there and a media group as well, it's certainly been interesting to see how it works. And I've been listening to a few Clubhouse live shows, and it does raise the question again whether it is worth putting time into what is a very time-intensive app. There is no doubting the hype. Over the last few days, as I record this, the app makers have been trying to get investment based on a valuation of $4 billion US dollars. So if you've not tried the app yet, here are some observations about it which might help you decide if you should be using it as part of your content strategy. And if you have used it, I've also got some new research which has come out which might be of interest to you as well. But first, let's talk about it for newcomers to Clubhouse, because there's certainly a lot of marketing guru waffle on Clubhouse. I listened to one room about public relations in which they took about 30 minutes to introduce themselves and try to sell their business to us before getting to anything useful. I actually listened to it, and I kept listening to it to hear how bad it got, and it was pretty bad from so-called professionals. Now, I'm also not quite sure how to filter out the noise yet, because if you can do that on Clubhouse, if you can filter out the bad stuff, it could be a game changer, because when you find good live broadcasts on there, they are exceptionally good because they're targeted at a specific audience and the things that we are interested in, rather than the sort of generalized shows you hear on normal radio. In fact, a lot of the good stuff is actually better than quite a lot of podcasts out there. Now, I know you certainly don't have time to waste, and nor do I, and I think we're not alone in that. So if you're not going to deliver value, then we as an audience are not going to stay. And I think that is the clear message that came out from me listening to Clubhouse here. I listened to a public speaking session and they got straight into it and gave me a bunch of ideas. The other observation I've made is the way it's presented as well. Some people run live streams like formal conferences where people hand back the microphone in a very awkward, slow way, while others are running very fast-moving live radio style shows, but with audience interaction. If you think of some of the classic radio shows with audiences you've listened to in your life, it's like that, but it's like you're in the audience. So there's a lot of different styles on there, but some of it is very, very good. The point I think here is that there is clearly an opportunity on Clubhouse to stand out if you are prepared to offer real value and make it an entertaining experience. Now, one of the speakers at the Innovation in Speaking conference this weekend that I was a speaker at, Anand Tamboli, made a really good point that you've got to get the balance of content, entertainment, and technology right. And a lot of people aren't yet doing that, which presents an opportunity for you. I will link to him as well in the show notes too, because he made some really interesting observations about this. Point 2 on Clubhouse, and the eMarketer, the organization, has been doing some research on it. And what it showed is that 79% of US adults haven't heard of Clubhouse yet. Of the 3% who have used it, 2% liked it and 1% didn't. Some commentators say these figures show the app is not gaining traction, but others say it's simply because the rest haven't discovered or realized its potential yet. My own view is I'm going to be trying it and doing some tests. So if you would like to follow what I do, follow my name on R. Midson on Clubhouse. Oh, and if you need an invite, I have 7 right now, as this is an invite-only app. If you didn't know, let me know about it. I will send one to you if I've got any left. So to round up what I've been observing this week, get to the value fast in a podcast. Don't waffle. John Lee Dumas sums it up by talking about value bombs. And as he also shows us, you need to make titles that will appeal to your targeted audience and contain keywords that will resonate with them. This is something I have really got to work on myself. But it's been really interesting reading what he says he does. Apple are changing the word subscribe to follow. If you want to reach a specific target group with your message, like travel agents or small business people, make a series that answers specific questions they are asking. Use a through line to help you write a public talk about your podcast much faster. And Clubhouse is growing and showing potential. And if you can give real value on there, you could rise to the top. Oh, and don't forget, if you boost a Facebook post, it doesn't happen straight away. Lots of food for thought this week. The plan is to do a live version of this show on Clubhouse very soon, in which I will run through the news stories that I'm covering each time, but I'll also open it up to discussion from you, because I would love to know your thoughts and experiences with all these topics and how it can help us improve our content. That's me, you, and everyone else who's trying to make podcasts in particular. Now, if you're not on Clubhouse, don't forget, I've got those 7 invites as well, so let me know. As always, if you know someone who might like to follow this show, then do let them know all about it, where they can find the show, and share the links with them so they can subscribe. And on YouTube, get them to click that bell as well so they get notifications when new shows come out. Whatever your content project and whatever your reasons for doing it, have a fantastic week creating, and let me know what you learn on social media as well. I'll speak to you very soon.